Michael, what's up, my brother? You think you're scary? You ain't got shit on this guy. All right, so a couple weeks ago, I finally sat down and took the time to watch Netflix's Dahmer, and figured I'd jump on here and shoot a quick review, discuss it a little bit with you guys. Wow. As badass as you think you are, Mr. Tough Guy, you ain't eating, folks. All right, so I'm like totally unprepared to do this. I didn't take any notes. I didn't write anything down. I just kind of figured it's been, I want to say it was 2 weeks ago today that I actually finished watching Dahmer, but I've been busy, haven't had a chance to take the time and actually do a proper review for this movie. And to be quite honest with you, I ain't so sure how proper any of the reviews I do on this channel are, but we're going to give it a shot. So I have to assume that the vast majority of you out there know exactly who Jeffrey Dahmer was. I was a 20-something when all of this stuff went down with Jeffrey Dahmer, when he was killed in prison and so on and so forth. If you don't know anything about him, go look him up. It's a quite the interesting yet disturbing story. So you got a guy who was more or less neglected as a child. I don't know if abused is the right word. I don't know if that's the word I would use. Neglected. Some of the parenting tactics with him were questionable, like his father and him doing taxidermy or autopsies on roadkill. For me, that thought never crossed my mind to do with my kids. And never had the desire to do that with my father. But, you know, to each their own, I guess. So, this little boy grew up kind of, it seemed like he was an afterthought for his parents. And he definitely had, like, emotional problems. And he bullied in high school. And just the typical shit that you hear about with kids that have mental, I don't even know, that have like sort of a breakdown or emotional disturbing tendencies. There's usually some pretty neglectful background and bullying background and backgrounds of abuse and so on and so forth. And that seems to be the case what you had here with Mr. Dahmer. He grows up, he is a homosexual, and he is luring in, kind of bribing, trapping, torturing, killing, and sometimes eating his prey, we'll put it that way. Eventually he gets caught by the cops. He's got a neighbor that lives next door to him in an apartment, constantly trying to get somebody to look into what the hell's going on in Jeffrey Dahmer's apartment. There's a lot of noise, there's a lot of screaming, there's a lot of foul odors coming from over there. But nobody seems to want to do anything about it. And they just let this shit continue to go on. Eventually he is caught. And it turns out that I believe the number was 17 victims. That's how many people Jeffrey Dahmer actually killed. And once he's in prison, the one thing I didn't know about Jeffrey Dahmer was I knew that he was killed in prison, but I did not know the manner in which he was killed in prison. I was always under the impression, like I said, I was probably somewhere in my 20s when all this shit went down with him in prison anyway. I was always under the impression that a fellow inmate beat him to death with a mop. I actually wasn't too far off with that. He was actually beaten to death in prison by a fellow inmate while he was mopping, if this Netflix series is actually accurate. So, enough of the spoilers on the story and the movie itself. This thing, it's 10 hours long. It's called a limited series. 10 hours long. 10 one-hour episodes, roughly. And I'll tell you what, man. I was blown away by this thing. One of the people that was behind this was one of the writers here and was responsible for this Netflix series was Ryan Murphy. I don't know how many of you out there, I have to assume that a lot of you out there are familiar with American Horror Story. Well, that was the brainchild of Ryan Murphy. And if it wasn't he wasn't the brainchild. He was somebody way up on the ladder, and he was very responsible for that series. A lot of that series was kind of strange, but it was always very well written, very good storytelling, very creepy, very eerie, and taking Ryan Murphy and putting him behind the camera and responsible for telling the story of Jeffrey Dahmer. Kind of have a feeling, not knowing anything about it. I never even watched a trailer for this. I saw other people reviewing, and I said, you know what, I got to sit down and watch this thing. But knowing that he was the one, that Ryan Murphy was somewhat responsible for this, I had very high expectations. Also knowing that the main character being portrayed, Evan Peters being the one portraying Jeffrey Dahmer, he looked right for the role. I know him through American Horror Story. I believe he was on every episode, and if I'm wrong, don't crucify me. He was on every season of that show except for one, if I'm not mistaken. I know that the show is no longer on FX. I know it's on some streaming service, maybe Paramount Prime, Amazon Prime. I don't know where it is now, but I don't know if Evan Peters is still on that show, but I know he was on the vast majority of the original run of that show on FX. And I watched just about all of it, if not all of it. I may have watched all of it. And he was the one outstanding shining light. He was on all but one season, and I believe Sarah Paulson was also on all but one season. I don't think she was in the first season. She may have been every season thereafter, the second going forward. Evan, at some point very late on, skipped the season. I don't know why he did, but he did. Loved Evan Peters on that show, so I had very high expectations. And I mean, look, let's just face it, he looks the role. I saw images of him as Jeffrey Dahmer with the glasses on, with the deadpan face, and it was eerily similar to Jeffrey Dahmer. So I had high expectations. I'm also a fan of Niecy Nash. I like her. I've been a fan of her since she was doing that like house swap, a room swap show she did many, many moons ago before anybody knew who the hell she was. My wife and I watched that show. So I've always kind of been a fan of hers, from the outside looking in, kind of keeping an eye on her, not necessarily on purpose, but she always would seem to pop up here and there. She, in my opinion, in addition to Evan Peters, deserves an award for her performance in Dahmer. Absolutely home run, knocked it out of the park. Phenomenal role she played in this series on Netflix. Who else was on there? His father, Jeffrey Dahmer's father, was portrayed by Richard Jenkins. He's one of them guys, if you don't know him simply by name, he's one of those dudes who's never the star of the show. He's always like a supporting actor in everything. Very, very good, very convincing. The movie that comes to mind for me is he was the father figure in Guillermo del Toro's The Shape of Water a few years ago. He was great in that, and he's great in this. Another familiar face that's in this, I actually didn't realize that his wife in this movie was, his second wife in this movie was Molly Ringwald. As I'm watching this movie, I can't figure out why the hell she looked so familiar to me. Then after it was over and I looked up some stuff on IMDb, I saw that it was Molly Ringwald. So, pretty good acting talent in this movie cast to play these four main characters in here. Well, Molly Ringwald ain't such a main character, but she's a bit character. She's like a side character. Support, hair falling off of me. She's a supporting character in the movie, and she, as she always does. You don't ever think of Molly Ringwald when you think of great actors, but everything she's ever been in has been pretty fantastic. This was, like I said earlier, a tremendously, overwhelmingly wonderful little thing that Netflix put together here. I absolutely loved everything about this. Just the little details that are in this. If I remember correctly, somewhere along the lines, I heard that this story, obviously this story is not all told by Jeffrey Dahmer, but I believe some of it's told by Jeffrey Dahmer, and a lot of it is told by family and friends and witnesses and the neighbor maybe that Niecy Nash played in the film. It's not a film. What's it? Limited series, whatever. So I have to assume that the details that are in this thing are pretty accurate, and this is a really good case of reality being a lot more scary than fiction. There's really people out there like this. This guy was killing people for years and years and getting away with it. And he would almost get caught and he would sneak away or slip away. A lot of negligence by the cops here. He should have been caught at a very key spot earlier in his killing spree, and he slipped past the cops there too. More neglect, more negligence, not wanting to listen to somebody. I'll tell you, man, if you have not seen this, I couldn't recommend this any higher. Evan Peters and Niecy Nash in this limited series were spectacular. There should be awards coming. I have to assume after this, you're going to see a hell of a lot more of Evan Peters out there. He deserves it. After what he did in this, I guess if you're squeamish and faint of heart, maybe you don't want to watch this. But if you're interested in something that's like real in-depth and detailed about Jeffrey Dahmer and serial killers in general, this is probably something that you'll want to check out. So with that, I couldn't recommend this thing any higher than I am. Go check this out. It's on Netflix. I have to assume it's not going anywhere anytime soon. It's called Dahmer, something Monster. I don't remember what the secondary title of it is. But if you go on Netflix right now, it's trending. It's everywhere. It's probably going to pop right up on your page. All right, I'm getting out of here. If you guys like this video, please give me a thumbs up. If you really like this video and you've been enjoying my content up to this point, please do me a huge personal favor. Click that subscribe button and ring that bell. Take care of yourself. Take care of each other. Have a kick-ass day. Thank you for watching, folks. See you in the next one.